At the reading of my will, my son laughed and said, "Who would want that old hag's money anyway?" His wife added mockingly, "She probably has nothing." Then my accountant walked in with 3 briefcases, cleared his throat, and said, "Before we begin, let me clarify the total estate value." Their faces went white when he said the number. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Marcus sighed, a loud, bored sound that bounced off the polished mahogany of the conference table. It was the first sound any of them had made in 3 minutes, a deliberate silence they wore like ill-fitting suits. I watched them from a place beyond that room, from a stillness they could not fathom. My son's gaze was fixed on his phone screen, his thumb scrolling. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, examined her manicure with theatrical concentration, the diamond on her left hand catching the cold fluorescent light. The lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, was arranging papers with a soft rustle, his movements precise and unhurried. He was a prop in their little drama, the necessary formality before they could get back to their important lives. The air in the room was heavy with their shared expectation of nothing. They thought this was a waste of their time. They thought they were here to hear about a few dusty bonds, some outdated furniture, the modest proceeds from a life they considered modest. I had seen the thought pass between Marcus and Chloe when they arrived, a glance that spoke of shared inconvenience. They had come out of obligation, a final public performance of familial duty. Marcus leaned toward Chloe, his voice a stage whisper meant to be heard. "This is absurd. How long does this charade take? Who would want that old hag's money anyway?" A cold spike, familiar and dulled by time, pressed against the memory of my heart. He had said things like that before, of course. Always just within earshot, always with that casual cruelty disguised as a joke. But here, in this room of law and legacy, the words hung differently. They were a final verdict on my life, pronounced by my own blood. Chloe didn't look at him. A small, derisive smile touched her lips. "Probably enough to cover the cost of this room for an hour," she murmured back, her eyes sweeping the sober, expensive decor with contempt. And those dreadful brooches she loved, a collection of costume junk. They believed it. That was the core of it. They believed their own assessment so completely that it had become their truth. I was the old hag. My things were junk. My life had yielded nothing of value. Their greed was not even an active hunger. It was a passive disappointment that there was nothing here worthy of their appetite. They were waiting for the polite denial of a prize they already despised. Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "If we are all ready to proceed, I will now begin the reading of the last will and testament of Dr. Eleanor Victoria Sterling." The door to the conference room opened then. All heads turned. Adrian Clark stood on the threshold, my accountant of 25 years. He looked exactly as he should, a man in his 50s, hair silvering at the temples, dressed in a navy suit that was neither new nor old, but impeccably maintained. His expression was neutral, professional. In his left hand, he carried 3 slim, identical briefcases of brushed aluminum, each secured with a combination lock. They were not lawyers' boxes. They looked like something used to transport sensitive data or precious metals. Marcus frowned. "Who is this? We're in the middle of something private." Mr. Hargrove stood. "Mr. Adrian Clark. He is listed here as a principal executor alongside this firm, per Mrs. Sterling's instructions. She was very specific about the order of proceedings." Adrian entered without waiting for an invitation. He placed the 3 briefcases on the table with a soft, definitive clack, lining them up parallel to its edge. They sat there, sleek and alien, amidst the yellowed parchment and manila folders. He did not sit. He remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back, surveying the room. His gaze passed over Marcus, over Chloe, over my sister's grandson who had come out of vague curiosity. There was no warmth in that look, no recognition of shared grief. It was the look of an auditor beginning a review. "My apologies for the interruption," Adrian said, his voice calm and clear, devoid of inflection. "Before Mr. Hargrove reads the legal instrument, I am required to execute a separate personal directive from Dr. Sterling. She wished for a preliminary clarification to be made." Chloe let out a small, exasperated puff of air. Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "A clarification? About what? This is a will reading, not a seminar." Adrian ignored him. He looked at no one in particular, his eyes fixed on a point on the far wall. He was a man delivering a statement. "Dr. Sterling instructed me to attend this meeting to first read a brief personal statement she prepared. Following that, I am to disclose the total, confirmed value of her estate at the time of her passing. She believed context was necessary before the distribution of assets could be understood." A ripple of impatience went through them. This was an unnecessary complication, a quirky, posthumous delay from the old woman who had always been so quiet, so still. They shifted in their seats. My nephew checked his watch. "Can we just get on with it?" Marcus said, his voice tight. "What context could possibly be needed? Read the will, tell us what's what, and we can all leave." Adrian's eyes finally moved, settling on Marcus. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a degree. "The context," he said slowly, "is the answer to the question you posed moments before I entered." The room went utterly still. Marcus's face froze. Chloe's carefully curated expression of boredom slipped, revealing a flicker of confusion, then dawning apprehension. They remembered. They remembered what had been said. They realized the door had been open, the acoustics of the wood-paneled room clear. Adrian did not smile. He unlocked the first briefcase with a series of soft, precise clicks. He did not open it. He merely placed his hand on its cool surface. He took a single sheet of paper from his inner jacket pocket. He put on a pair of reading glasses. "This is Dr. Sterling's statement," he said. He began to read, and his voice, so often used to discuss yields and equity, became the vessel for my own. "To my family assembled, you are here because the law and a thin filament of custom require it. You expect a conclusion. I intend to provide you with a beginning. You have, for many years, operated under a significant misapprehension regarding my life and its value. Today, that error will be corrected." He paused, letting the words, so formal, so cold, settle upon them. Marcus was no longer slouched. He was rigid. Chloe's hand had gone to her throat. Adrian continued, his tone unchanged. "You confused silence with emptiness. You mistook dignity for poverty. You interpreted a refusal to perform wealth as an absence of it. This was your mistake, not my condition." He folded the paper neatly and returned it to his pocket. He removed his glasses. "Now, for the clarification," he said. His hand rested again on the closed briefcase. The total liquid and illiquid assets, properties, holdings, and intellectual capital of the estate of Dr. Eleanor Victoria Sterling, as consolidated and verified by my firm at the close of business on the date of her death, has a net value of $42 million. The number fell into the silence like a stone into deep, frozen water. It did not splash. It simply sank, its weight pulling everything down with it. Marcus's mouth opened. No sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving a pale, waxy mask. His eyes were wide, uncomprehending, fixed on the three briefcases as if they contained vipers. Chloe made a small, choked sound. Her manicured hand clamped over her mouth. Her eyes, a moment ago so full of derision, were now pools of sheer, calculated shock. I could see the numbers spinning behind them, the frantic recalibration of every sneer, every condescending compliment, every dismissed piece of costume junk. The nephew's chair squeaked as he jerked forward. Mr. Hargrove remained perfectly still, his face a professional blank, though I knew he had been aware. The room held its breath. Adrian Clark stood immobile, a monument to a truth they had never thought to seek. The 3 locked briefcases gleamed under the lights, silent, heavy, and full of everything they had never seen. The number did not dissipate. It expanded. It filled the vacuum of their disbelief, a tangible, suffocating presence. $42 million. It was not a figure that belonged to my narrative, the one they had written for me. It was a figure from their world, the world of mergers and luxury cars and beach houses. And now it was mine, which meant it was, potentially, theirs. The shift in the room's energy was physical. The air grew dense with the abrupt, frantic realignment of every past assumption. Marcus was the first to break the paralysis. A strangled sound, part laugh, part cough, escaped his throat. 42, that's a mistake. His voice was thin, stripped of its usual condescending authority. He looked at Adrian Clark not with challenge, but with a plea. There has to be a decimal point off, or you're including some theoretical value. Her house isn't worth more than... The valuation of the primary residence on Willow Lane is not included in that sum, Adrian interrupted, his tone flat. That asset is separate. The figure I stated is liquid and near liquid assets, securities, bonds, private equity holdings, cash accounts. Private equity? The words fell from Chloe's lips like something foreign. She was leaning forward now, her earlier boredom replaced by a sharp avian focus. Her eyes darted from Adrian's face to the briefcases and back. But how? She was retired. She was a consultant. Adrian turned his head slowly toward her. She was Dr. Eleanor Sterling. She held a Ph.D. in economics from the University of Chicago. For 30 years, she operated a boutique consultancy for institutional investors. Her client list included firms whose names you would recognize, though she was bound by non-disclosure agreements. Her work was her own capital. She invested it. I watched the information land, each fact a small, precise hammer blow. The Ph.D. had been a framed piece of parchment in my study, something they called Mom's old diploma. The consultancy was Mom's little hobby. They had never asked. They had never thought to ask. My nephew David finally found his voice. So, where is it? The money. His tone was naked, hungry in a way Marcus's shocked denial was not. He saw a number and he wanted the thing itself. Adrian's hand rested on the first briefcase. That is the purpose of this meeting. The will dictates the distribution, but Dr. Sterling wished for you to understand the composition of the estate first, to see it. He pressed the latches on the first case. The clicks were loud in the silent room. He lifted the lid. Inside were not stacks of cash. That would have been vulgar, and I was never vulgar. Instead, there were neat, color-coded portfolios, tabbed and indexed. On top lay a single summary document. Adrian lifted it. This is a consolidated portfolio summary, he said. It details the primary investment vehicles. A globally diversified stock portfolio, managed according to a value-based algorithm she designed herself. He flipped a page. Municipal bond holdings from 11 states, a significant position in a venture capital fund focused on medical technology, an investment she made in 2012. The fund went public last year. He looked up. She was an early and substantial limited partner. Marcus had gone very still. The Medical Technology Fund. I remembered a conversation 2 years ago. He had been talking at dinner about a hot new medtech IPO some client was involved with, speaking in the slow, simplified terms he used for me. It's complicated, Mom, but it's about to be very big. I had nodded, asked a mild question about the underlying technology. He had patted my hand and said, "Don't worry your head about the details." The details were that I owned a 5% stake before the IPO. He had been speculating with a few thousand shares. I had owned the architecture. The annualized return on her personal investments, Adrian continued. his voice devoid of pride, merely factual, averaged 14.2% over 25 years, net of all fees. She reinvested all dividends and capital gains. Chloe was doing math in her head. I could see it. The quick, desperate calculations of what that percentage meant on a principal that must have started in the millions to reach the number he had said. She was trying to backtrack, to find the point where the story she believed diverged from reality. She would not find it because she had never looked at the story at all. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered, but the fight was leaving his voice. He was a lawyer. He understood documents, audits, verified numbers from a firm like Adrian's. This was not a claim. It was evidence, laid out in a locked briefcase. The impossibility was not the number. It was his own monumental, lifelong error. Adrian closed the first portfolio. He placed it back in the briefcase but did not shut the lid. He moved his hand to the second briefcase. "The second component," he said, unlocking it. "Real property." He lifted out a stack of deed copies, each with a small photograph paper-clipped to the top. He placed them one by one on the table, like dealing cards. The freehold of a commercial building on Addison Street, currently leased to a dental practice and a law firm. A photograph of a tidy 3-story brick building. A 40-acre timber plot in Oregon, managed by a sustainable forestry company. A picture of dense green woods. A condominium in Santa Fe, New Mexico, furnished, currently used as a vacation rental. A terrace with a view of desert hills. A warehouse in an industrial park near the airport, leased to a logistics company. A nondescript corrugated metal building. Each placement was a soft thud on the mahogany. Each was an asset that generated quiet, steady income. Assets that required management, intelligence, foresight. Not the flash of a designer coat, but the deep-rooted wealth of brick and land and timber. Chloe stared at the picture of the Santa Fe condo. Her mouth was a tight line. She and Marcus had rented a similar place for a ski trip last year. She had complained about the cost for weeks. "These are not sentimental holdings," Adrian stated. "They are income-producing investments." She visited each one, reviewed all management contracts personally. She understood depreciation schedules, property tax law, and tenant rights. He let that settle, the image of the old hag, patiently reading tenant rights legislation. It did not fit. It shattered the mold they had made for me. He then lifted the final item from the second case. It was a simple key, old and heavy, on a plain steel ring. He placed it directly on the table in front of Marcus. "And this," Adrian said, "is the key to a safety deposit box at First Mercantile Bank, downtown. Box 1147. It contains the certificates for 12 kilograms of physical gold, purchased in increments between 2005 and 2010. It is not part of the financial portfolio." She considered it a separate hedge. The key lay there, a cold, unadorned piece of metal. Gold. The oldest, most undeniable form of wealth. It was the final, unassailable proof. There were no more questions about decimal points or theoretical value. The gold was real. The buildings were real. The algorithm was real. Marcus looked at the key as if it were a venomous insect. He did not reach for it. He could not. The man who had sighed over the inconvenience of this meeting now faced a key that represented a fortune in bullion, and he was afraid to touch it. Adrian left the second briefcase open. He looked at their faces, pale and stunned in the sterile light. "The third briefcase," he said, his hand moving to the final lock, "pertains to the disbursement of these assets. But before we proceed to the will itself, do you require any further clarification on the estate's scope?" The question was not an offer. It was a verdict. They had asked, in their way, who would want the old hag's money. He had shown them. Now they had to sit in the vast, hollow silence of their answer. Adrian's question hung in the air, a formality that required no answer. Their faces were answer enough, a gallery of shock, greed, and dawning, uncomfortable comprehension. I watched them from the quiet of my study, a place they seldom visited. The polished silence of that conference room dissolved, replaced by the memory of a different quiet, the one I cultivated and they mistook for emptiness. It was a Tuesday afternoon 2 years ago. The light from the bay window fell across my desk in a warm, slanted rectangle, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the stillness. My computer screen glowed with a series of complex charts, Fibonacci retracements superimposed on the price movement of a semiconductor stock. A cup of tea, gone cold, sat beside a legal pad filled with my neat, angular handwriting. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the computer and the distant tick of the hallway clock. My phone rang, the landline. The caller ID showed Adrian's office number. I picked up the receiver. Adrian? Eleanor. I have the final numbers from the Franklin exit. His voice was always calm, a steady stream of data. The wire hit the designated account this morning. Your share is $2,147,000 after carried interest and fees. The fund is officially closed. I looked at the chart on my screen, then out the window at the oak tree in my backyard. Its leaves were just beginning to turn. Acceptable, I said. Better than the model projected by 8%. It was. Your early insistence on that management clause paid the dividend. I've taken the liberty of rebalancing as per your instructions. 60% into the municipal bond ladder, 30 into the value index, 10 to cash. Good. Email me the confirmations. There was no excitement in our exchange. It was the review of a harvest, calculated and expected. This was the work. This was the architecture of the number that now sat in that room with them. We spoke for 3 more minutes about tax implications and the timing of the next fund prospectus. He was my accountant, but more than that, he was one of the few people who engaged with my mind, not their caricature of me. As soon as I placed the receiver back in its cradle, the phone rang again. This time, my cell phone. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. The transition from one world to the other was always jarring. I answered. Marcus. Hey, Mom. His voice had a forced, bright energy. I could hear road noise, the blinker of his car. How's it going over there? Everything quiet? Everything is fine. Are you driving? Yeah, just heading back from a client lunch. Listen, I have a sort of fun thing to talk to you about. He paused, and I could picture his expression, the one he used when he was about to explain something simple to someone he presumed would find it complex. You know how Chloe's been wanting a new SUV, the safe ones with all the cameras? I recall. I did. She had mentioned it several times, each time emphasizing the cost as a badge of honor. Well, I found the perfect model, a pre-owned Lexus, certified, but it's basically new. It's a really incredible opportunity. Another pause. I said nothing. He continued. The thing is, to lock it in, I need to put down a more substantial deposit than I'd planned, just a temporary cash flow thing. I was wondering if I could borrow a little from you, just a bridge loan. Say, $15,000? I'd pay you back in 60 days, once my bonus clears. The number was a rounding error from the conversation I had just concluded. It was not the amount, it was the performance. The careful simplification, the unspoken assumption that $15,000 was a significant, possibly troubling sum for me to consider. $15,000, I repeated, my voice neutral. I know it sounds like a lot, he said quickly, his tone softening into condescension. And you don't have to worry about the details. I'd draw up a simple promissory note for you so it's all official. You wouldn't have to think about it. I'd handle everything. You wouldn't have to think about it. The phrase sat between us. He was offering to spare me the burden of thought, the same mind that had just dissected a private equity exit and directed a $2 million reallocation. What is the annual percentage rate the dealership is offering for financing? I asked. A beat of silence. The blinker clicked. Oh, it's high. That's the point. I want to avoid their financing. It's predatory. This way is smarter. If their rate is predatory and your bonus is certain, a short-term personal loan from your bank would likely have a lower effective cost than a familial loan, considering the opportunity cost of my capital and the potential for relational complication. I spoke in the same tone I used with Adrian. It was simple arithmetic. He laughed, a short, uncomfortable sound. "Mom, come on, you're overcomplicating it. It's just family helping family, a small loan. You must have some of those CDs coming due or something." CDs. He pictured my wealth as quaint certificates of deposit, gathering modest interest in a vault. He did not picture algorithms, venture capital funds, or timber plots. The narrative was fixed for him. I looked at the cold tea, at the charts on my screen. I felt the vast, invisible distance between my reality and his perception. A familiar, tired sadness settled in my bones. It was easier in that moment to acquiesce to the role than to shatter it, to let him be the savvy son helping his financially simple mother navigate a small familial transaction. "I will need to check my liquidity," I said, adopting the slight hesitancy he expected. "I can let you know tomorrow." Relief flooded his voice. "Great, that's great, Mom. Don't stress about it, okay? Just let me know, and don't go moving any mountains. It's just a little car stuff." He ended the call with a cheerful goodbye. I held the silent phone for a moment before setting it down. The quiet of my study felt different now, charged with the echo of his patronizing assurance. I minimized the stock charts. On my legal pad below the investment notes, I wrote, "Marcus, loan request, $15,000, 60 days. Then a few lines down, I wrote a single stark question. When did he stop seeing me? The memory faded, leaving me back in the present, an observer to the consequence. Adrian still stood before my family, his hand on the third briefcase. They had just seen the proof of the architecture. They had not yet heard about the loan. That was in another file, in another part of my records. The promissory note he had so officiously drawn up, a document treating me like a feeble-minded lender, had been repaid on day 59. I had deposited the check, and then I had filed it away. It was not evidence of my wealth. It was evidence of my poverty in their eyes. And now they were rich with shame, and I was finally, perfectly quiet. The memory of that phone call, of the $15,000 that required no thought and all this performance, dissolved as Adrian's hand remained on the third briefcase. My family sat in the new silence he had created, a silence built of solid things, gold bars, brick buildings, venture capital stakes. But their understanding was still a ledger of numbers. They had not yet grasped the philosophy. For that, they would need to remember a coat. It was last Christmas at Marcus and Chloe's home. Their house was a study in conspicuous modernity, glass, steel, cold white surfaces that showed every fingerprint. The kitchen island was a slab of marble so vast and empty, it felt like a landing strip. I stood near it, holding a glass of sparkling water, observing the ritual. Chloe entered from the garage, a flush of cold air following her. She was carrying a large, glossy shopping bag from a boutique whose name was synonymous with expense. "You will not believe what I just found," she announced, her voice pitched to Carrie. "The end-of-season sale, but they had one left. My size." Marcus looked up from his phone, a dutiful smile on his face. "Another one? The walk-in closet is officially a fire hazard." "This is different," she said, pulling out a mass of fabric. It was a coat, knee-length, in a shade of camel. The lining was a vibrant, patterned silk. She slipped it on, twirling once. The fabric was fine, the cut sharp and contemporary. Italian wool, cashmere blend. Feel it, Eleanor. She extended an arm toward me. I set my glass down and touched the sleeve. It was soft. "It's very beautiful, Chloe. The color suits you." She beamed, absorbing the compliment as her due. "I know, right? And for 40% off. A complete steal." She smoothed the lapels, her eyes alight with possession. Then her gaze swept over me, taking in my own attire, A simple, well-tailored navy wool dress I'd owned for a decade, a single strand of pearls. Her expression softened into a familiar, pitying condescension. "You know, Eleanor, you should really treat yourself sometime. You always wear such classic pieces. There's a whole world out there." She leaned in as if sharing a secret. "Don't worry, sweetie, maybe one day. When you're ready to splash out a little." The word sweetie hung in the air, a diminutive poison. Marcus chuckled, a low, complicit sound. "Mom's not really into fashion, babe. She's practical." Practical. It was their code for cheap, for unambitious, for small. I withdrew my hand from the coat sleeve. I smiled. It was the same calm, closed-lipped smile I had perfected over years. "Perhaps one day," I echoed, my voice mild. The moment passed. Chloe took off the coat, draping it over the back of a chair like a trophy. The conversation moved to other topics, their planned ski trip, the cost of Marcus's new golf clubs, the irritating price of organic salmon. I listened, sipping my water. The camel coat remained in my periphery, a symbol of a world they believed I could not afford to enter. 2 days later, my friend Gloria came over for tea. We sat in my living room, the afternoon sun warming the faded Persian rug. Gloria was the only person with whom I could be entirely unguarded. "They bought the impression of wealth," I said to her, recounting the incident. "A coat on sale. They think the discount is the clever part. They do not think about the asset." Gloria snorted, stirring her tea. "They wouldn't know an asset if it bit them on that designer clad behind. The nerve of that girl calling you sweetie. I'd have poured my tea in her lap." "Anger is a currency they understand," I said. "Quietness confuses them. They mistake it for nothing." "So show them something," Gloria urged, not for the first time. "Just once. Bring out the mink. Let her feel it." I shook my head. The thought was distasteful. In my bedroom closet, behind a panel of fabric, hung a vintage full-length mink coat. It had belonged to my mother. It was from the 1950s, the pelts dark, rich, and incredibly dense. It was not an item one bought on seasonal sale. It was an heirloom, a piece of history and craftsmanship. A reputable furrier had appraised it for me 5 years ago for insurance purposes. Its value was approximately triple what Chloe's Italian wool coat had cost, even at 40% off. "It would be vulgar," I said to Gloria, "to use it as a tool in a comparison, to reduce it to a number in a game with her. That is their language. I choose not to speak it." "So you just let her think she's won?" Gloria's frustration was warm, a protective heat I cherished. "She hasn't won anything. She has a coat. I have a coat. The difference is I know what both are worth, and I do not need the newer one to tell me my value." I took a sip of tea. "They believe flash is substance. My entire life has been an exercise in separating the two. I will not conflate them now to make a point to a woman who would not understand the point if I spelled it out for her." Gloria sighed, leaning back. "One day, Eleanor. One day they'll see." "Perhaps," I said. And in that moment, looking at the sincere concern on my friend's face, the first seed of this final plan took root. Not a plan of flashy revelation, but of systemic, undeniable proof. A proof that did not require me to wear a fur coat to a Christmas dinner, but that required a man with 3 briefcases to lay bare the foundation of a life. Back in the conference room, Adrian's fingers tightened on the latch of the 3rd case. Chloe was staring into the middle distance, her mind perhaps circling back to that Christmas, to the sweetie she had tossed so carelessly at a woman whose quiet coat in a closet was worth more than her noisy prize. The memory was no longer a private victory for her. It was becoming evidence in a trial she had not known was underway. The practical woman had been the wealthiest person in the room that day, and her practicality had been a choice, not a limitation. They were just beginning to feel the weight of that distinction. Adrian's fingers released the latch on the 3rd briefcase. The sound was a sharp, final click in the room's dense silence. He did not open it immediately. Instead, he looked at the faces before him, as if assessing whether they were prepared for the next layer of truth. Their shock had solidified into a strained, almost painful attention. The gold key still lay untouched in front of Marcus. The deed to the warehouse was a silent rebuke beside Chloe's elbow. "The third case," Adrian began, his voice retaining its flat, procedural tone, "contains the documents pertaining to the future disposition of the assets we have just outlined. However, Dr. Sterling's instructions were clear. Before the legal will is read, you are to review a curated selection from her personal archives. She termed it a portfolio of a life. It is meant to provide context for her decisions." He opened the lid. This case did not hold bound reports or property photos. It contained files, slim, archival folders with clear plastic sleeves. He lifted the first one and placed it on the table. "This," he said, "is a copy of her doctoral dissertation from the University of Chicago, 1978, Asymmetric Information in Decentralized Markets, a game theoretic approach." He slid a single typewritten page from the sleeve, the abstract. She was 24. Her work was cited for years in academic circles before she moved to applied economics. Marcus stared at the dense block of text, the mathematical notations. His lips moved slightly as if trying to form a word. He had never read it. I doubt he had ever known its title. His mother's PhD had been a framed artifact, not an intellectual achievement. Adrian placed the abstract back. He lifted another folder. Correspondence. 1985. He extracted a letter on faded letterhead from a prominent investment bank. He read a line aloud, his voice giving no weight to the name. "Your analysis of the regulatory shift was instrumental in our positioning. We are pleased to offer the consultancy contract as discussed." This was her first major independent contract. She was pregnant with you at the time, Marcus. Marcus flinched, a tiny physical recoil. The timeline was a fact he had never connected. His birth, my professional independence. In his history, I had always been just Mom. The woman who signed that contract had no place in his story. Adrian continued, a relentless archivist. Folder after folder. A photograph of me at a conference in 1992, speaking at a podium, my hair in a style Chloe would call dated, my posture assured. A client list, with names redacted but the logos of Fortune 500 companies clearly visible on the letterheads. A graph, hand-drawn by me, predicting the dot-com bubble's contraction a full year before it burst, with a note to Adrian in the margin. Maintain short positions in these sectors. Liquidity event imminent. She predicted the 2000 crash? David, the nephew, blurted out, his voice full of a new, crude awe. She modeled its probability and adjusted her clients' portfolios accordingly, and her own. Adrian's reply was matter of fact. He pulled another sheet, a memo from 2008, to the same effect regarding the subprime mortgage market. Her personal portfolio was moved to 60% cash and treasuries by mid-2007. The evidence was no longer about money. It was about sight. It was about foresight. While they were buying SUVs and designer coats, I was reading the tremors in the global economic plates. While Marcus explained loan terms to me slowly, I was writing memos that predicted catastrophes. Adrian then lifted a different kind of document. It was a simple, leather-bound journal. He opened it to a bookmarked page. Her personal journal. She kept notes on observations, not just finances. He adjusted his glasses. The entry is dated 3 years ago. It reads, "Spoke with M today. He requested a loan for a vehicle. Explained it in the simplest terms, as one would to a child. I gave him the hesitation he expected. The performance is exhausting. I wonder if he sees the car as a tool or a trophy. I have never bought a trophy. Tools, yes. A reliable car is a tool. A building that generates rent is a tool. A stock that pays a dividend is a tool. This is the language I speak. They have chosen not to learn it." The air left Marcus's lungs in a slow, silent stream. His face was ashen. To hear his private request, his condescension, reflected back in the cold, analytical prose of a journal entry. It was a violation of the narrative he had built. He was not the savvy son guiding his mother. He was a subject in her clinical observation. "There are more entries," Adrian said, closing the journal. "Observations on family gatherings, notes on conversations overheard, analyses of spending habits and their correlation to projected financial stability." His gaze swept over them. She was always analyzing. It was her nature. "You were not exempt." Chloe found her voice, thin and strained. "That's a violation of privacy, spying on her own family." Adrian turned his impassive eyes to her. "Is it?" She wrote her thoughts in a private journal, which she has now made partially public via this directive. You, however, frequently voiced your thoughts about her within her hearing. You called her an old hag in her presence, believing she was out of earshot or too simple to be wounded. Where is the greater violation? Mrs. Sterling? Chloe shrunk back as if struck. Adrian returned to the case. He removed a final thick folder. "This is the summary of her intellectual property. Patents pending on 2 financial modeling algorithms she developed. Royalty agreements with a software firm for their use. These are not assets that depreciate. They generate revenue in perpetuity. They are the closest thing to magic in the modern world. She built them." He let the folder drop onto the table with a soft thump. The portfolio of a life was complete. It contained no love letters, no pressed flowers, no recipes. It contained theorems, contracts, predictions, and cold, clear observations. It was the biography of a mind they had never acknowledged. "The context," Adrian said, "is that Dr. Sterling's wealth was not an accident. It was not luck. It was the logical compound output of a specific kind of intelligence applied consistently over 50 years. You are now aware of the scale of that output. The will you are about to hear is the product of the same mind. It would be prudent to listen with that understanding." He closed the 3rd briefcase. The 3 cases now sat in a row, their contents having done their work. They had not just revealed a fortune. They had revealed a person of immense capability and quiet endurance, a person who had watched them, understood them, and documented their disregard. Mr. Hargrove, who had remained a silent witness throughout this unprecedented prelude, finally stirred. He picked up the formal legal document from his stack. "Shall we proceed to the last will and testament now?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the hollowed-out room. No one answered. They were too busy meeting the ghost he had just made of me. I was no longer the silent mother. I was the economist, the strategist, the architect, and I had just forced them to read my blueprints. Mr. Hargrove's question lingered, unanswered. The family was still staring at the closed 3rd briefcase, at the ghost of the journal entry that seemed to suck the warmth from the room. Adrian cleared his throat, a soft, deliberate sound. He placed his hand back on the 2nd briefcase, the one he had opened earlier to reveal the deeds and the key. "With the context established," Adrian said, his voice slicing through the paralysis, "we will now return to the tangible assets. The legal will addresses their distribution. But Dr. Sterling wished for a more detailed presentation of the real property holdings before those terms are read. She believed you should understand not just their value, but their nature." He reopened the 2nd case. He had already shown them the deeds. Now he removed a larger, flat portfolio. He unzipped it, revealing a series of architectural blueprints, surveyor's maps, and professional photographs, all laminated and neatly ordered. "The property at 2145 Addison Street," he began, laying a blueprint on the table. It showed the 3-story brick building, but with floor plans. "You saw the deed. These are the specifications. Built in 1920, reinforced concrete construction. Fully renovated in 2010. Current tenants: a pediatric dental practice with a 10-year lease and a family law firm with a 7-year lease. Annual net income after expenses, property taxes, and management fees: $218,000. He paused, letting the figure so mundane and so solid settle. She purchased it in 2005 for $1.2 million. Its current market value is approximately $4.5 million. He placed a photograph of the bustling street, the building's windows clean, its stone steps well maintained. It was not a glamorous asset. It was a machine that made money. He moved to the next set of documents. The timber plot in Oregon, 42 acres, not 40. He glanced at Marcus, correcting the earlier casual number. It is not just land, it is a managed forest, certified sustainable. The company that leases the harvesting rights plants 3 trees for everyone harvested. Annual royalty income fluctuates with timber prices. 5-year average, $35,000. She bought the land in 1998 for $80,000. Its value is not primarily in the land, but in the regulated perpetual harvesting rights. He showed a photo of dense, towering evergreens, a marked contrast to the urban brick. She visited once. She said she liked the silence. He produced the file for the Santa Fe condo. There were interior photos, terracotta tiles, exposed wooden beams, Navajo rugs on the walls. Not merely a vacation property, Adrian stated. It is part of a high-end rental program. It is booked 90% of the year. Net income after management and maintenance, approximately $45,000. She stayed there for 1 week in 2015. She found the altitude disagreeable but appreciated the light. She never mentioned it to you. The casual revelation, she never mentioned it to you, was a small, sharp needle. They took lavish vacations and talked about them incessantly. I had owned a piece of a destination and kept it to myself because it was not a trophy. It was a line item. Then came the warehouse. The photograph he placed down was an aerial shot showing the corrugated metal building nestled among others in an industrial park. This asset is the most recent acquisition, purchased 4 years ago. It is leased to a logistics company that uses it for regional e-commerce fulfillment. The lease is triple net. The tenant pays all taxes, insurance, and maintenance. She receives a check each month for $9,750. She never saw it in person. She reviewed the structural engineer's report and the tenant's credit rating. That was sufficient. Marcus finally stirred, his voice hoarse. A warehouse. She bought a warehouse. He said it not with understanding, but with a kind of bewildered disgust. A warehouse was not a beach house. It was ugly, practical. It was the antithesis of the status he valued. She did, Adrian confirmed. The cap rate was exceptional. It was a rational decision. He then reached back into the case and withdrew a smaller black folder. There is one more property. It was not included in the initial summary because it is not an income vehicle. It is a bequest. He opened the folder. Inside was a deed and a photograph of a small, charming cottage with a wraparound porch set back among oak trees. This is a house on Cape Cod, in Truro. It is 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. It sits on a bluff overlooking the water. Chloe's breath caught. A Cape Cod cottage. This was a language she understood. Picturesque, charming, valuable. She purchased it 20 years ago, Adrian continued, his tone unchanged. She used it for 2 weeks every August. She never invited family. She went alone, or occasionally with her friend, Gloria. She called it her thinking cabin. There is no television. The furniture is old and comfortable. The bookshelves are full of novels and poetry, not financial journals. He looked up, meeting their confused stares. This property is not part of the calculable estate. It is listed separately. It has been left in its entirety to Gloria Henderson in recognition of a friendship that asked for nothing and offered everything. The silence that followed was different. It was not the silence of shock at a number, but of insult. A Cape Cod house, the only asset that matched their idea of desirable inheritance, was gone. It was leaving the family. It was going to my friend, to the woman who had seen me. "She can't do that," Chloe burst out, the words ripped from her. That's a family asset. That should stay in the family." Adrian closed the black folder with a definitive snap. "It is her asset. She has done it. The transfer paperwork is already filed with the county. The keys were delivered to Miss Henderson this morning." He let the statement hang. The cottage was gone. It had never been theirs to lose, but they felt the loss acutely, because it was the only thing they knew how to want properly. He gathered the blueprints and photos, returning them to the second briefcase. The real property, therefore, consists of the income-producing assets detailed, which remain part of the core estate, and the Truro cottage, which does not. The total appraised value of the income-producing real estate is $11.2 million. It is illiquid, stable, and generates approximately $300,000 per year after all costs. This was her safety net. This was the bricks and mortar she often referenced in her journals when speaking of foundation. He closed the second briefcase for the final time. The presentation was over. They had seen the money, the mind, and now the land. 3 layers of a life they had walked over without seeing. Mr. Hargrove adjusted his glasses, the sound loud in the new quiet. He held up the formal will, the vellum crisp. "If there are no further clarifications," he said with a slight deferential nod to Adrian, "we can proceed to the document that dictates the inheritance of these assets." This time, no one objected. They were hollowed out, their greed now forced to contemplate the vast, intricate structure of what they had coveted without understanding. The foundation was laid. Now they would learn the price of the house. Mr. Hargrove's hand was steady as he unfolded the will. The vellum made a dry, important sound. He cleared his throat, preparing to read the first legal clause. But Adrian moved again, a slight shift that drew every eye. He placed his palm flat on the third and final briefcase, the one he had opened only to reveal the portfolio of a life. There was more inside. "Before the reading of the will," Adrian said, his voice cutting through the formal silence Mr. Hargrove had begun to establish, "there is a final component from this case. Dr. Sterling stipulated that her philanthropic directives be presented separately and before any inheritance terms are disclosed." Chloe made a small, choked sound. "Philanthropic?" Adrian ignored her. He opened the case once more. From beneath the archival folders, he withdrew 3 thick-bound documents. Each had the name of a different charitable foundation embossed on the cover. He placed them in a row on the table. "The Sterling Bishop Educational Trust," he read, tapping the first. "Founded 15 years ago, it provides full tuition scholarships and living stipends for undergraduate women of color pursuing degrees in economics, finance, and mathematics. To date, it has supported 47 scholars. 39 have graduated. The current endowment is $6 million. It is structured to be perpetual." He moved to the second. "The Eleanor Va Sterling Community Health Initiative, founded 10 years ago. It funds mobile health clinics, preventative care programs, and financial assistance for medical expenses in underserved urban communities. Annual disbursement, approximately $400,000. Endowment, $4.5 million. The third document was slimmer, more personal. "The Thomas Sterling Memorial Arts Fund, named for her late husband, established 5 years after his death. It provides grants to individual artists, musicians, painters, writers, who are over the age of 60 to support the continuation of their work. It is not large. Endowment, $1.5 million. She said it was for voices the market forgets." Adrian looked up. "These are not casual donations. They are structured trusts with independent boards, annual audits, and clear mission statements. She served on the investment committee for each until 6 months before her passing. Her total lifetime philanthropic contributions, including these endowments, exceed $13 million. The number was a new kind of shock. It was not a number they could imagine getting. It was a number I had already given away to strangers. Marcus found his voice first, raw with disbelief. She gave away $13 million to students and clinics and old artists? The words old artists were tinged with the same derision he might have used for me. She did, Adrian confirmed. These trusts are irrevocable. They are not part of the estate you are here to discuss. They exist independently. Their endowments are drawn from the total net worth already disclosed. The 42 million figure is after the establishment and funding of these entities. It was a final, brutal recalculation. The fortune was not just larger than they imagined. It had been actively shaped, directed, and shared according to a value system they had mocked. While they were calculating car payments and coat prices, I had been building a scholarship fund. While they whispered about my empty life, I had been funding mobile clinics. Why? The word burst from David, the nephew. It was a plea for sense. Why wouldn't she keep that for the family? Adrian fixed him with a cool stare. You are about to hear the will, but her personal writings on this subject are clear. In a journal entry from 5 years ago, she wrote, Gloria asked me today if I ever wanted to buy a yacht. I told her a yacht is a hole in the water into which one pours money. A scholarship is a door one opens forever. Marcus would want the yacht. He would not understand the door. Adrian paused. She believed wealth was a tool for legacy. Her chosen legacy is here. He gestured to the 3 bound trusts. Chloe was shaking her head slowly, her eyes locked on the health initiative document. Mobile clinics in bad neighborhoods, that's throwing money away. Is it? Adrian's question was icy. The initiative's latest report indicates a 17% reduction in pediatric asthma emergency room visits in its target zip codes over 3 years. She considered that a superior return on investment to many of her stock holdings. She had the reports sent to her quarterly. She read them. The image was too much for them to hold. The old hag reading clinical outcome reports, comparing them to stock yields. It shattered the last fragile vessel of their understanding. Adrian then produced a single sheet of paper, a simple list. These are the other, smaller charities she supported with annual gifts: the public library, the botanical garden, the food bank, the symphony orchestra, the animal shelter. Her annual charitable budget was $150,000. She paid it first, every January. It was her largest single bill. He slid the list across the table. It came to rest near Marcus's elbow. The ordinariness of the charities, the sheer unglamorous decency of them, was somehow more insulting than the grand trusts. It spoke of a life lived locally, thoughtfully, in ways they had never noticed. The purpose of this disclosure, Adrian said, closing the 3rd briefcase for the final time, is to establish that Dr. Sterling's assets were not inert. They were in motion. They were working according to a plan that reflected her principles. Her financial strategy and her philanthropic strategy were parts of a single, coherent worldview, a worldview that valued sustainability, education, dignity, and quiet efficacy. He took a step back from the table, his task nearly complete. The wealth you are hoping to inherit was filtered through this worldview. The capital that built it was grown with discipline. The capital that was disbursed was given with intention. The remainder, which the will addresses, comes with the same clarity of purpose. You are not inheriting from a simple woman who saved her pennies. You are inheriting from a strategist who allocated her resources, human and financial, according to a complex set of values. The will is the final allocation. He gave a small, sharp nod to Mr. Hargrove. The message was clear. They are as ready as they will ever be. Mr. Hargrove took a slow breath. His eyes on the family's shattered faces, he lifted the will again. This time, there was no interruption. The room was a drained vessel. They had seen the fortune, the intellect, the properties, and now the heart they had never credited me with. All that remained were the terms. The rules of the game they had not known they were playing, set by a player they had never truly seen. Mr. Hargrove's voice began, a dry legal monotone that filled the hollow room. I, Eleanor Victoria Sterling, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils. The formal words were a gateway, the first step into the final structure I had built. I watched their faces, lean now with a hungry, anxious attention. The philanthropic revelations had disoriented them, but this was the map to what remained. This was the treasure they still believed they could claim. Article 1, Hargrove read, payment of debts and expenses. All my just debts, funeral expenses, and administrative costs are to be paid from my residuary estate. He looked up briefly. Standard clause. Marcus gave a slight, impatient nod. Get to the good part, his body language screamed. Article 2, specific bequests. Hargrove adjusted his glasses. I bequeath the sum of $100,000 to my friend, Gloria Henderson, in addition to the property in Truro previously transferred. A small, loving sting. More money for the friend, nothing for them yet. I bequeath the sum of $50,000 to Mr. Adrian Clark, in recognition of his decades of loyal service and discretion. Adrian gave a small, formal nod of acknowledgement. He had known about this, of course. The bequest was both a gift and a message. This man was more family to me in matters of substance than my own blood. Hargrove continued. I bequeath my personal library, all books, papers, and research materials, to the Sterling Bishop Educational Trust for the use of its scholars. My mind given away. Not a single book to Marcus, who had never shown interest in any of them. I bequeath my jewelry, with the exception of the items listed in Schedule A, to my granddaughter, Lena Sterling, to be held in trust until her 25th birthday. Chloe's head snapped up. Lena was their 7-year-old. My jewelry, which Chloe had called costume junk, now had a named heir, and it was not her. Hargrove produced a separate sheet, Schedule A. The following items of jewelry are excluded from the bequest to Lena Sterling. He read from the list. 1 pearl necklace, cultured. 1 pair of diamond stud earrings, 1/4 carat each. 1 gold wedding band. He looked up. These 3 items are to be sold at auction. The proceeds are to be added to the residuary estate. Chloe's face flushed with anger she could not voice. The costume junk was worth bequeathing. The only pieces she might have recognized as having modest value were being sold off for scrap. It was a deliberate, quiet insult. Article 3, Hargrove intoned, and the room tensed. This was the core. Disposition of residuary estate. All the rest, residue and remainder of my estate, real and personal, of whatever kind and wherever situated, which I own at my death, I give, devise, and bequeath as follows. He paused, taking a sip of water. The delay was exquisite. Their eyes were locked on his lips. The entirety of the residuary estate shall be placed into a testamentary trust, to be known as the Sterling Family Legacy Trust. Adrian Clark and the firm of Hargrove and Associates are named co-trustees. The trust shall be administered according to the terms set forth in a separate trust document, which is incorporated by reference. He lifted a second, even thicker sheaf of paper, the Sterling Family Legacy Trust Agreement. Marcus leaned forward. A trust? Why a trust? Why not just distribute it? Hargrove looked at him over his glasses. The will dictates a trust, Mr. Sterling. The terms of the trust dictate the distributions, if you will allow me to continue. His tone held no sympathy. He was my instrument now. He opened the trust agreement. The principal of the trust shall be invested conservatively. The net income generated by the trust each year shall be distributed in equal shares to my son, Marcus Sterling, my daughter-in-law, Chloe Sterling, and my nephew, David Pearson. A wave of palpable, relieved greed washed over them. Income. Every year. A share of the profits from $42 million. Their shoulders dropped slightly. They began to calculate. However, Hargrove said, the word a cliff edge, distribution of any share of the annual income is conditional. Condition 1. The beneficiary must be current on all federal, state, and local taxes, with documentation provided to the trustees annually. Marcus waved a hand. Fine, of course. Condition 2, Hargrove continued, his voice hardening slightly. The beneficiary must submit, along with their tax documentation, a detailed, verifiable report of 100 hours of volunteer service performed in the previous calendar year. The service must be for a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization. The organization cannot be one with which the beneficiary has a business or professional affiliation. The report must include a supervisor's signature and contact information. Silence. Chloe stared. Volunteer service? 100 hours? That's 2.5 work weeks. Correct, Hargrove said without inflection. Condition 3, he went on, for Marcus and Chloe Sterling specifically. In addition to the volunteer service, you must both complete, with a passing grade, a certified course in personal financial literacy. The course must be at least 30 hours of instruction and include modules on budgeting, investing, debt management, and charitable giving. Proof of completion must be submitted to the trustees. You have 18 months from today to fulfill this requirement. No income distributions will be made until it is satisfied. Marcus's face was a mask of stunned outrage. A financial literacy course? I'm a lawyer. Your mother's stipulation stands, Hargrove said. He turned to David. For David Pearson, your additional condition is to secure and maintain full-time employment for a continuous period of 12 months, or to be enrolled in an accredited degree or vocational program. The trustees will verify. David slumped back, his dream of passive income evaporating. Condition 4, Hargrove said, and now his voice carried a heavier weight. The trustees are empowered to withhold any beneficiary's income share if, in their sole discretion, the beneficiary engages in public or private behavior that disparages my memory, my legacy, or the values demonstrated by my philanthropic work. This includes, but is not limited to, mocking the terms of this trust, expressing contempt for the required volunteer service, or displaying avaricious entitlement. The room turned ice cold. It was a gag order, a clause against their own contempt. They could not even vent their frustration without risking their money. The principle of the trust, Hargrove concluded, shall remain intact for 25 years. After that period, if all conditions have been met consistently, the trustees may, at their discretion, begin to disperse portions of the principal according to a separate schedule. If the conditions are not met, the principal, upon the last beneficiary's death, shall be distributed in full to the Sterling Bishop Educational Trust. He set the papers down. The sound was final. My revenge was not in denying them the money. It was in attaching strings they would find humiliating, tedious, and enlightening. They would have to work for it, not with their hands, but with their character. They would have to learn, to serve, to be silent. They would have to become, in some small, enforced way, the kind of people I valued, or they would get nothing. Marcus broke the silence, his voice a low rasp. She's making us jump through hoops, like trained dogs. Adrian spoke for the first time in minutes. No, Mr. Sterling. She is offering you a curriculum. The tuition is your time and your humility. The degree is your inheritance. You are free to decline to enroll. The choice was now theirs. They could have the money, but only by admitting, through their actions, that they had been wrong about everything, about wealth, about value, about me. The fortune was now a mirror, and they did not like what they were being forced to see. Adrian's words hung in the air, a stark summation of their predicament, a curriculum, tuition, a degree. The legal language of the trust had been a cage. His explanation made it a schoolhouse. Marcus's face cycled through shades of red and pale. Chloe's hands were clenched so tightly on the table that her knuckles were white bone. David simply looked defeated, as if he had already failed the employment requirement. "This is punitive," Marcus said, the words scraping out of him. "It's designed to humiliate us. Financial literacy? She's lecturing us from the grave." Adrian did not argue. He merely waited. "There must be a way to challenge this," Chloe insisted, turning to Mr. Hargrove. "Can a will really force adults to take classes? To volunteer? It's coercion." Mr. Hargrove steepled his fingers. "The will establishes a trust. The trust document outlines the conditions for distributions. Beneficiaries are not forced to do anything. They are free to not comply. The trust simply will not distribute funds to non-compliant beneficiaries. The conditions are neither illegal nor unconscionable. In fact, encouraging education and charitable service could be viewed as morally sound trust purposes. A challenge would be expensive, lengthy, and in my professional opinion, unlikely to succeed." The hope that had flickered in Chloe's eyes died. The law, my old ally, was against them too. It was then that Adrian reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. He withdrew not a document, but a small, sleek digital media player, black and unmarked, with a single USB port. He placed it on the table beside the 3 briefcases. It looked alien and final. "There's one more item," he said. His voice, for the first time, lost a fraction of its professional detachment. A faint layer of something else, respect, perhaps solemnity, colored his tone. Dr. Sterling recorded a personal message. She instructed that it be played after the reading of the will and the trust terms, but before any questions or discussions about them. She wished to have the final word. Marcus stared at the media player as if it were a live grenade. A video? What more could she possibly have to say? "You are about to learn," Adrian said. He produced a short cable and connected the player to a small portable projector he had positioned at the end of the table earlier, unseen. He aimed it at a blank white section of the wall. He pressed a button. The room lights seemed to dim, though they did not. A rectangle of light appeared on the wall, then resolved into an image. It was me. I was sitting in my favorite armchair in my study, the one by the fireplace. I was wearing a simple cream-colored sweater and my pearls. My silver hair was neat. My hands were folded in my lap. The lighting was soft, natural, from the window behind the camera person, Gloria, I'm sure. For a moment there was no sound but the faint hum of the projector. I looked calm. I looked directly into the lens. Then I began to speak. My voice, recorded months ago, filled the conference room. It was my voice as they knew it, quiet, measured, precise. But it carried a new weight, an absolute clarity. There was no weakness in it. Marcus, Chloe, David, others who may be present. I paused, my gaze steady. If you are watching this, the legal formalities are complete. You now know the extent of my estate. You have heard the terms of its distribution. You are likely experiencing a combination of shock, anger, and calculation. That is to be expected. I saw Marcus's jaw tighten. He hated being predicted. I will not speak long. My purpose is not to chastise you further. The documents have done that. My purpose is to explain, once, clearly, why I have done this. I shifted slightly, my hands relaxing. You confused my silence for simplicity. You mistook my lack of interest in performance for a lack of substance. This was a fundamental error in your analysis of the world. I built a life on accurate analysis. You built your perception of me on a flawed data set. You never sought better data. Chloe looked away from the screen, as if my gaze were physically upon her. The money is not the point. The money was always a tool. I used it to secure my independence, to cultivate my mind, to help others, and to create a legacy that felt meaningful to me. You saw it only as a scorecard. You thought my score was low. You were wrong. I leaned forward just a little. The movement drew them in, unwillingly. The conditions of the trust are not punishment. They are an opportunity. They are the same opportunities I valued: service to community, the pursuit of knowledge, financial responsibility, personal dignity. These are the actual currencies of a rich life. If you wish to access the monetary currency I accumulated, you must first engage with these. Consider it a bridge. You may choose not to cross it. That is your privilege. My expression softened, not into warmth, but into a kind of weary resolve. I loved you. That love was often a lonely country because you did not wish to visit it. You preferred the postcard version of me, the grandmother, the mother, the quiet old woman. You did not want the citizen, the economist, the strategist, the philanthropist, so I let you have your postcard. But a life cannot be contained on a postcard. I paused, letting that settle. Marcus had closed his eyes. The trust is my final attempt to show you the whole map, not of my money, but of my values. You may follow it or not. The choice and its consequences are now entirely yours. The work of understanding me is now your burden, just as the work of being misunderstood was once mine. I sat back. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. It was not a smile of triumph, but of completion. I have nothing more to say. The rest is paperwork. Goodbye. The screen went black. The silence in the room was total. It was a different silence than before. It was not the silence of shock at a number or of greed confronted with conditions. It was the silence of a door closing, a message delivered with such devastating finality that there were no words left to form in response. Adrian stepped forward and disconnected the media player. The small mechanical sounds were grotesquely loud. He placed the player back in his pocket. On the wall, the rectangle of light shrank to a point and vanished. No one moved. No one spoke. They were alone now, with the architecture of my will and the echo of my voice. The ghost had not just appeared. It had spoken its piece and departed, leaving them in the rubble of their own assumptions. Mr. Hargrove finally broke the stillness, his voice cautiously gentle. "Are there any questions about the administrative next steps?" It was not a question about the meaning of anything. It was a question about procedure. It was the only kind of question left. Marcus opened his eyes. He did not look at Hargrove, or at Adrian, or at Chloe. He looked at the blank wall where my image had been. He said nothing. The lesson was over. The test had begun. Mr. Hargrove's question about administrative steps faded into the thick, unresponsive air. No one answered him. There were no questions about procedure because the procedure was now irrelevant. The only questions that mattered were immense, personal, and humiliating, and they would not be voiced in this room. Adrian was the first to move. He stepped to the table and began methodically packing the 3 briefcases. The sound of the latches clicking shut was a series of period marks at the end of a long, shocking sentence. He collected the portfolios, the deeds, the trust documents, leaving only the key to the safety deposit box on the table in front of Marcus, a tangible, cold reminder of the gold he had not known existed. Marcus finally moved his gaze from the blank wall. He looked at the key. He did not pick it up. His hand, resting on the table, trembled slightly. I recognized the tremor. It was not grief. It was the physical manifestation of a world view breaking apart. The old hag was gone. In her place was a strategist who had outmaneuvered him from beyond the grave, using the very thing he coveted as bait in a trap of her own design. Chloe was crying. Silent, angry tears streaked her perfectly made-up cheeks. They were not tears of sadness for me. They were tears of furious frustration. She was doing math again, but a different kind. Calculating the hours of volunteer work, the indignity of a basic finance course, the sheer tedious effort required to access what she felt was hers by right. The money had transformed from a dream into a chore, a demeaning, mandatory chore. David pushed his chair back from the table, the legs scraping loudly on the hardwood floor. He stood up, shoving his hands into his pockets. "So that's it then," he said to no one. "Get a job or go to school, or get nothing." He sounded like a teenager who had just been given a list of household duties. He turned and walked out of the conference room without another word, the door sighing shut behind him. He was the first to flee the scene of the crime, though he still did not fully understand what the crime had been. Adrian finished his task. The 3 briefcases stood aligned at his feet. He picked them up, one in his left hand, 2 in his right. He looked at Mr. Hargrove. "The executed copies for your files are in the green folder. My office will be in touch to initiate the trust administration. You have my contact information." Mr. Hargrove nodded, a professional exchange between executors. The human drama in the room was not their concern. The mechanism was in motion. Adrian then turned to face Marcus and Chloe. He regarded them for a long moment, his expression not unkind but utterly devoid of pity. "The first annual review for income distribution will be in 1 year. The trustees will require the documented volunteer hours and, for you two, the certificate of completion for the financial literacy course by the 18-month deadline. You will receive a packet in the mail with approved course providers and reporting forms." He stated it as he might state the terms of a loan. It was business. Marcus found his voice, though it was cracked and thin. "She hated us." Adrian shook his head, a single slow movement. "No, Mr. Sterling. If she hated you, she would have left everything to the trusts and given you nothing. This," he gestured slightly with the hand holding the 2 cases, "is something else. It is a final lesson. Whether you learn from it is, as she said, your privilege." He did not wait for a reply. He walked to the door, his steps even and firm. He opened it, stepped through, and was gone. The door closed with a soft, definitive click. Marcus and Chloe were alone with Mr. Hargrove, who was now organizing his own papers, avoiding their eyes. The room, once charged with tension, was now simply empty. The revelation was complete. The vengeance was not a single act, but a state of being they would have to inhabit. The fortune was a mountain they could see, but to climb it they would have to become different people. The path was laid out in volunteer forms and coursework syllabi. Chloe wiped her face with the heels of her hands, smearing her makeup. "I need to get out of here," she whispered. Marcus did not look at her. He was still staring at the key. After a long moment, he reached out. His fingers closed around it. The metal was cool. He held it in his fist, his knuckles white. Then he stood, the chair legs scraping just as David's had. He did not speak. He turned and walked to the door, the key gripped tightly. Chloe scrambled to follow him, her heels tapping a frantic rhythm on the floor. Mr. Hargrove was left in the silent room. He finished stacking his documents, placed them in his leather briefcase, and snapped the locks. He looked around at the empty chairs, the abandoned water glasses, the blank wall where my face had been projected. He smoothed his tie, a man who had just presided over a quiet legal dismantling. Then he, too, left, turning off the lights as he went. The room was dark. It was over. From my remove, I felt no surge of triumph. I felt a calm, vast quiet. The balance sheet was final. They had their answer to the question they had asked so carelessly. Who would want that old hag's money? They would. Desperately. And in wanting it, they would have to confront the old hag's mind, the old hag's values, the old hag's quiet, formidable strength. The money was no longer just money. It was a mirror. It was a teacher. It was a chain of their own making. My legacy was secure in the students who would graduate, the patients who would be seen, the artists who would create. And my family's inheritance was also secure, locked in a trust that would either improve them or deny them. It was a perfectly structured outcome. The revenge was not in their deprivation, but in their enlightenment. The weapon was truth. And I had fired the final calculated shot. The last laugh was not a sound. It was a silence they would have to live inside for the rest of their lives. A silence filled with the echoing click of 3 briefcases closing and the ghost of a woman's voice saying, simply, goodbye.